When four boys were playing in the woods at Lascaux in France in 1940, they little expected to come across cave paintings of bulls dating back to about 15,000 SE. Some cave paintings, found in Australia, Africa, and Europe, date back even earlier. While scholars can find out how and roughly when the earliest art was made, they will probably never be sure why. The same goes for much Paleolithic, Neolithic, and Bronze Age art, or prehistory. The ancient Near East saw the rise of the first cities and city-states in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. Temple complexes combined worship and business, and in these places archaeologists have discovered cuneiform tablets showing the earliest system of writing, as well as figure sculptures whose size attests to their importance. Fascination with ancient Egypt has rarely dimmed since Napoleon's army went up the Nile in 1798. The discovery of more than 100 mummies in 2000 fueled yet more interest in the era. Similarly, ancient Greece and Rome, from the Minoan civilization on Crete, home of the legendary Minotaur, to the Athenian democracy in the 5th century BCE, and on to the wall paintings discovered in Pompeii and Herculaneum, have been a continual cultural influence. Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism inspired art in the East, while the Maya developed the preeminent civilization in pre-Columbian America and, in Western art, Christian iconography gathered strength. To 1400 CE, prehistoric cave paintings are as beautiful as they are mysterious. No one can be sure of their purpose, but they provide a tantalizing record of the earliest days of human existence, along with an insight into the first stirrings of art itself. The oldest examples of prehistoric art date from the Upper Paleolithic. Key. First artists adorned their caves with a wide range of engravings and paintings. Key latter were produced with a limited range of earthy colors. Blues and greens were rarely available. The pigments were obtained mainly from mineral extracts, mixed with animal fat or blood. Subjects. The most popular subjects were animals. Human figures were less common, and were generally portrayed in a more cursory manner. Abstract signs are plentiful, but are much harder to interpret. There is considerable debate over the purpose of the animal paintings. Some may have been decorative, but there are good reasons for believing that they fulfilled some ritual purpose. Often, they were produced in parts of a cave that were barely accessible, where they could never have been seen properly. Sometimes, they were located in areas where no human debris has been found, suggesting that these were sacred spots, deliberately left uninhabited. In many cases, too, images were drawn on top of earlier paintings, which would detract from any decorative effect they might have. The most common theory is that the act of drawing the animals formed part of some magic ritual that was designed to bring the cavemen better hunting. Horses and deer, sometimes known as the Sistine Chapel of Paleolithic art. Altamira in Spain is famed for its lifelike depictions of animals. Dating from 1300 BCE, the cave paintings capture the creature's sense of movement and the texture of manes and fur. Current events. Lower Paleolithic era appearance of the earliest forms of primitive humans. Middle Paleolithic era, Neanderthal era, c. 38,000 BC. Upper Paleolithic era modern humans appear. The earliest examples of cave painting are created. Cent 15,000, c. 10,000 BE Magdalenian era, named after the La Madeleine site, in the Dordogne region of France. Produces the finest examples of cave painting in Europe. C. 12,000-3000 BC Mesolithic era or Middle Stone Age. Prehistoric art. European cave and rock art. 30,000 BC, 10,000 BC. Some of the finest European cave art was produced in southwestern France and northern Spain during the final phase of the Ice Age, from 15,000 to 10,000 SE. The paintings at Altamira in Spain, which were discovered in 1879, are so well preserved that for many years archaeologists doubted their authenticity. Most of the images depict bison, although there are also a number of horses and red deer. The paintings at Lascaux in France were discovered accidentally by four boys playing in the woods. The cave, which contains more than 600 paintings, boasts some of the most spectacular prehistoric artworks ever found. most notably in the celebrated Hall of Bulls. This is dominated by pictures of 4 black bulls, each measuring up to 4.9 m long. The cave complex at Chauvet in France also includes a remarkable array of animal paintings and is much older, dating back to around 30,000 SE. Bison. Most cave paintings show live animals, but this bison appears to have been depicted after its death, with its legs trussed up. The striking image was created with just 3 colors, ochre, red, and black. C. 13000 BC. Rock painting Altamira, near Santa Elena del Mar, Spain. Lions. The animal paintings at Chauvet include bears, lions, panthers, rhinos, and owls. These lions are an extinct variety, with males that have no manes. 30,000 BCE. Rock painting Chaves Pointe d'Arcy, Ardèche Department, France. The shaft of the dead man, discovered in 1940. The cave paintings at Lascaux are often cited as the finest examples of prehistoric rock art in the world. This enigmatic scene shows a man with a bird-like head, along with a bison that seems to be disemboweled. C. 170008C. Rock painting, Lascaux, Dordogne, France. Closer look, hunter or shaman. Archaeologists have made numerous suggestions about the identity of this figure with his bird-headed stick. Some suggest he is a hunter with a decoy, others a shaman with a totem. Australian cave and rock art, C. 40000C, 1780C. Australian art has a very long pedigree. Rock engravings at Warden Hill and Panoramide North and South Australia are thought to be more than 40,000 years old, while traces of pigment at Cape York in Queensland appear to date back to C. 25000 SE. Many Australian Aboriginal paintings are more difficult to date, however, as they have often been retouched on several occasions. Australian Aboriginals believe that the original designs have been formed by creation spirits during the dream time, the ancestral past, when their shadows passed over the landscape. The most important concentrations of rock painting can be found at Arnhem Land in Kimberley, near the northern coast, and Victoria in the southeast. The images usually consist of slender anthropomorphic figures or X-ray paintings of animals. Wandjina paintings. The Wandjina are ancestral figures, the spirits of clouds who govern the weather. These paintings were discovered in 1837. Main figure 100x78 cm, Kimberley District, Western Australia. The Lightning Brothers. These images come from a rock shelter in the ancestral territory of the Wardaman people. The Lightning Brothers were 2 creation heroes, Jabaringi and Yajabula, who brought lightning and the monsoon rains. Rock painting, Ingalari Waterhole, Willaroo Station, Victoria River, Australia. Faceless. There were no fixed images for creation heroes, as these were tribal deities, varying from region to region. In most cases, the brothers were shown as simple, human-like forms with few facial details. They often had rays emanating from their heads. African cave and rock art. C. 4000 BC, C. 1500 BC. The finest surviving examples of prehistoric African art are located in remote, mountainous regions. In many cases, the sites were occupied for centuries and contain thousands of paintings and engravings. At Tassili Nadjer in Algeria, paintings are so numerous that different periods can be detected. The earliest feature hunters pursuing animals that are now extinct. Following this, there are scenes of herdsmen tending cattle and, finally, images of more recent animals, such as horses and camels. The most intriguing paintings, perhaps, were produced by San Bushmen in the Drakensberg area. Some prehistorians believe these depict shamans and therianthropes, composite human and animal forms, involved entrance ceremonies with elands, large antelopes. The elands were thought to possess spiritual power, which shamans tried to harness through ritual dances and trances. Hunters with bowmen. Thousands of paintings and engravings were produced at Tassili Nadjer, a rocky plateau in the Sahara, in a period when the climate was more favorable than today. Early scenes of hunters were followed by paintings of herdsmen. C. 4008C rock painting, Tassili Nadjer, near Janet, Algeria. Shamanistic image with eland. This prehistoric masterpiece from The mountainous Drakensberg region has been interpreted as a trance picture. The animal is accompanied by humans with hooves. Rock painting, Game Pass, Camberg Nature Reserve, South Africa. The White Lady when it was furs. Discovered. This painting was interpreted as a white woman. Some now believe, however, that the figure is a male shaman wearing white body paint. See /SD century BCE. Rock painting, height 40 centimeters, Tsibab Ravine, Brandberg Mountain, Namibia. Portable figurines. C30,000 BC, C10,000 BC. Alongside their rock art, early humans also produced a variety of portable objects. Weapons were often decorated with images of prey, presumably as a form of hunting magic. There was also an intriguing group of very ancient European sculptures known collectively as Venus, figurines dating from Paleolithicera, C35,000-8000 SE. Most of the statuettes represent naked, well-rounded women. Their purpose is unknown, although their obvious voluptuousness has led some archaeologists to regard them as fertility figures. More than 100 of the figures have been found at sites ranging from France to Russia. They generally have tiny legs and arms. Indeed, the arms on the Willendorf figure, folded across her breasts, are barely discernible. Most of the statuettes could not have stood independently, and it is possible that they were designed to be held in the hand. Bison carving, this delightful carving, was made from a reindeer antler and used as a spear thrower. It was found at La Madeleine in France. C120008C. Ivory, length 10 centimeters, private collection. He Kostianki Venus / the earliest surviving non-functional objects come from the Paleolithic period. This female figure is from the Voronezh region in southwestern Russia. C23,000 BC. Stone. Height 10 centimeters. Hermitage, St. Petersburg, Russia. The Venus of Willendorf. The most famous of all the Venus figurines. This carving takes its name from the Austrian village where it was discovered during construction work on a railway. It was made from a small stone and tinted with red ochre. C24,000 BC. Limestone. Height 11 centimeters. Naturhistorisches Museum. Vienna, Austria. So, faceless appearance. One feature common to virtually all of the Venus figures is their lack of facial detail. In the case of the Willendorf statuette, the entire head is covered in hair. This may have served to emphasize the universality of the figure. Neolithic pottery. C9000 BC, C2400 BC. The earliest known ceramic vessels are from C11000 SE in eastern Siberia and Japan. Ceramic objects, including a Venus figure and numerous animal figurines, have been found at Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic. These date from C2400 SE. However, the craft became much more common in the Neolithic period as nomadic hunter-gatherers were gradually superseded by farming communities who kept livestock and grew crops. Their settled lifestyle enabled them to acquire more belongings without the worry of transporting them. Initially, most pottery was either modeled or built up in coils. In many communities, women made the pots for their own households. However, the invention of the potters will stimulate the growth of a specialist industry tea. He wheel was introduced in Western Asia in C3400 SE and reached Europe in the following millennium. Olmec baby, the ceramic baby, was made by the Olmec culture of Mexico. The purpose of this and similar crying babies is unknown, but some archaeologists have suggested that the Olmec performed infant sacrifice,
and the ceramic babies may have been connected to this practice. C800 BC, earthenware with bichrome slip, 31-20-21-48 cm, Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, Texas, U.S.
So, crying Malthus. Dummy cry could have had more meaning than appears at first sight. A crying toothless baby god often appears in Olmec art.
Pot with sculpted shaman head / was produced by the Magyario culture, which was based in the Chinese province of Gansu. 3rd millennium BC, painted earthenware, height 40 centimeters, Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, U.S. Pot with whorl design, his comes from the Middle Jomon period in Japan. Characteristically, the vessel is decorated with an elaborate, curvilinear design. C 7500-300 BC, low-fired ceramic clay, 38 by 33 centimeters, Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, U.S. Nok Birdman figure. Nok figures take their name from a village near the Niger River, where the first finds from this culture were made. These consist almost exclusively of ceramic sculptures, depicting an imaginative range of human and animal forms. Their original purpose can only be guessed at. It has been suggested, for example, that they may represent ancestor figures or deities, or that they were used in funerary rites. C 500 BC 200 C, terracotta, 47 by 20 by 22 centimeters, private collection. Closer look. Composite forms. Nok artists blended human and animal forms. This creature appears to have human hands, but its fingers are clenched tightly together, like a bird's claws gripping a perch. Crouching male figure, popularly known as the Thinker, this famous piece is a product of the Hamangia culture. C 3500-3000 BC, pottery, height 113 centimeters, National Museum of Art, Bucharest, Romania. Scarp sawing bowl. The decoration on some Neolithic pots mimics other materials. Parts of this vessel resemble the stitching that might have been found on leatherwork. C 3000 BC, terracotta, height 17 centimeters, National Museum, Copenhagen, Denmark. Stylized head. This is a typical example of the distinctive figures produced by the Vinaya culture, which flourished at a large farming settlement on the banks of the Danube, a few miles from modern-day Belgrade. C 4500, 4000 SC, terracotta, 18x 15 centimeters, Musej Kosova, Pristina, Serbia. Civilization was founded in Mesopotamia. The inhabitants of this region invented the wheel, agriculture, vehicles, cities, writing, law, medicine, philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. Mesopotamian art was mostly connected to the gods who were thought to watch over these early city-states. Origins and influences. In antiquity, Mesopotamia referred to the land between the rivers, namely, the Tigris and the Euphrates. This is roughly equivalent to modern-day Iraq. As the Sumerians and later the Akkadians and Babylonians occupied the area, they progressed from being hunter-gatherers to herding and agriculture. Production of surplus food led to the growth of states, administered by cities, which at their centers. The biblical Tower of Babel may have been based on the ziggurat of Babylon. People went to temples to worship their gods and offer them sacrifices. Because some of the gods were associated with planets, for example, Shamash with the sun, Sin with the moon, and Ishtar with Venus, planetary movements were thought to be very important by Mesopotamians. As a result, astronomy was born, and with it mathematics, which would one day lead to modern science. The Ishtar Gate, replica, one of 8 gateways of the ancient city of Babylon, constructed in c. 580 BC by Nebuchadnezzar Il. Built of bricks decorated with glazed reliefs of bulls and dragons, the gateway is 23 m high. It formed part of a sacred, processional avenue into the heart of the city. Current events. Copyright 1792 BC. Hammurabi comes to power, establishing Babylon as the center of his considerable empire. 717 BC. The Assyrian city of Khorsabad, Ter-Sharaqin, was founded by Sargon II. He erected a magnificent palace there, famed for its guardian figures, but Hisam relocated the capital to Nineveh. E 518 BC. Darius founds Persepolis, making it the centerpiece of the Achaemenid Empire. It remained an important seat of power until Alexander the Great destroyed it in 331 BC, an action he later regretted. Ancient Near East. Timeline. The Sumerians emerged in southern Mesopotamia around 3400 BC, with the magnificent finds at Ur dating from c. 2800 BC onwards. By c. 2350 BC, the Akkadians were in power, though they in turn were supplanted by the Babylonians, c. 1790 BC. The Assyrians began their rise in the sth century BC, eventually competing with a revitalized Babylonian Empire. The ancient Persians had their greatest success under the Achaemenid dynasty, 559-333 BC. 2600 to 2400 BC, Sumerian, the Queen's Lyre. c. 1750 BC, Babylonian, the worshipper of Larsa. 858–823 BC, Assyrian king Shalmaneser III. 604 to 562 BC, Babylonian Mushushu. 516 to 465 BC, Persian giant griffin. Chronology. Although Mesopotamia and its neighbors were occupied by a dizzying succession of races and cultures in ancient times, their art forms were often very closely linked. The Akkadians, for example, adopted many aspects of Sumerian civilization as their own. By the same token, the Stele of Naram-Sin, a monument to Akkadian military prowess, was eventually carried off by the Elamites, who used it as a symbol of their own victories. Style and subjects. Sculpture was the most durable medium employed during this period. On a miniature scale, the most ubiquitous item was the cylinder seal. The Akkadians produced some of the finest examples, but the device was commonplace throughout Western Asia from around 3000 to 500 BC. Usually an image was produced by rolling the cylinder across a clay tablet, but they were also used to seal doors and vessels of all kinds, or worn as amulets to ward off evil. Seals were also employed in various rituals, such as those connected with childbirth and sickness. They were marks of ownership or a person's authority, but were only rarely donated as offerings in temples. Sculpture in the round was also popular, as is confirmed by the many statues of worshippers and royal figures. The latter were not portraits, but symbols of power. Some of the most celebrated examples depict the Sumerian ruler, Gudea of Lagash. He took the trouble to import stocks of diorite, an extremely hard stone, to ensure that his memorials would survive. The ready availability of good, workable stone enabled the Assyrians and the Persians to create impressive, monumental sculpture, most notably in their huge, sculpted reliefs and their massive guardian figures. The Babylonians, however, specialized instead in polychrome, multicolored, reliefs on glazed bricks. These were so admired by the Persians that they employed Babylonian craftsmen to adorn their palaces. The Achaemenid rulers were equally fond of opulent metalwork. Their taste for luxury was proverbial in Greek circles, so they also employed the finest goldsmiths and silversmiths of the day. Statue of Gudea was a prince of Lagash, now Al-Hiba. He was known for his piety and commissioned several statues of himself, listing the temples that he had founded. c. 2150 BC, diorite, height 62 cm, Louvre, Paris, France. Akkadian cylinder seal. In this mythological scene, Ye, the Sumerian god of water and wisdom, passes judgment on Enzu, a monstrous birdman. c. 2200 BC, serpentinite, height 3.9 centimeters, British Museum, London, UK. Sumerian. c. 3400–2000 BC. Sumer is situated in Lower Mesopotamia, part of modern-day Iraq. The Sumerians are credited with the invention of writing, cuneiform, urbanization, and the wheel, while their cultural influence spread throughout Western Asia. In the arts, their craftsmen produced outstanding pottery, metalwork, and sculpture. Sumer was divided into city-states, the most important of which was Ur. Spectacular finds have been made in the royal cemetery there, particularly in the grave of a high-ranking woman called Puebi, buried with servants, jewelry, golden vessels, and musical instruments. The standard of Ur. Many researchers now believe that this was not a military standard but the soundbox of a musical instrument. c. 2600–2400 BC, shell, lapis lazuli, and red limestone, 26 centimeters high, British Museum, London, UK. Closer, look. War chariot. When they were unearthed, the shell figures were loose, and their original order could only be guessed at. Experts have assembled them into two panels, representing war and peace. Royal game of Ur found is in the Royal Cemetery at Ur. This game was similar to 1250, modern-day backgammon. c. 2250 BC, wood with inlays of shell, red limestone, and lapis lazuli, 2x11x30 cm, British Museum, London, UK. Queen's lyre. This instrument, from the grave of Queen Puebi in the Royal Cemetery at Ur, was intended to provide music in the afterlife. In the grave, a sacrificed slave was placed next to the lyre, with her hands over its strings. 2600 to 2400 BC, wood, shell, lapis lazuli, and gold, height 112 centimeters, British Museum, London, UK. Akkadian. C. 2500-1790 BC. The Sumerians were eventually conquered by Sargon, who united Mesopotamia under his rule and established his capital at Akkad. The Akkadians adopted many aspects of Sumerian culture, but made new advances in sculpture. The Stele of Naram-Sin, for example, records a military victory in an entirely novel fashion. Instead of a narrative sequence on horizontal strips, the sculptor has produced a single, unified composition. There is a sense of upward movement, as Naram-Sin ascends to claim equal status with the gods, and it also includes landscape elements. Head of Sargon / his regal portraits thought to be Sargon. C. 2334, 2279 BC, the founder of the Akkadian Empire. 2350 to 2200 BC, copper, height 37 centimeters, Iraq Museum, Baghdad, Iraq. Victory Stele of Naram-Sin. Naram-Sin is shown at the top of the slab, wearing the horned helmet of a god. Cent 2238 C, pink limestone, height 210 centimeters, Louvre, Paris, France. Hittite. C. 2000-1000 BC. The Hittites were living in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, by c. 2000 BC, reaching the peak of their power during their imperial period, when they controlled most of Asia Minor and northern Syria. Their surviving art consists mainly of metalwork and stone reliefs. The latter formed an integral part of their architecture. On gateways, they produced monumental, high-relief sculptures of lions, warriors, and mythical creatures. Head-joining walls, meanwhile, were decorated with friezes of low-relief carvings, usually depicting hunting scenes and religious ceremonies. Sphinx gates / Hypactus erecting monumental guardian figures at the entrances. Toacity was common in many parts of Near East. The image of the male sphinx originated in Egypt. Viewed in Anatolia was portrayed as a winged female. 1450 to 1200 BC, stone, Alaka Hoyuk, Turkey. Assyrian. C. 1500 BC 612 BC. The Assyrian heartlands were in northern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. The Assyrians took their name from the land they came from around Ashur, their religious capital, but soon built the far greater cities of Nineveh, Nimrud, and Khorsabad. At the height of their power, from 883 to 612 SC, the Assyrians commanded an empire that stretched from Persia to the Mediterranean. Assyrian art is most notable for its relief carving and sculpture. The most important theme was the lion hunt, an event that had both royal and religious significance. Depictions of the hunt frequently adorned royal palaces. On a much smaller scale, the Assyrians also produced very fine ivory carvings on plaques, which were mostly used as veneers on their furniture. Winged guardian figure. This is one of a pair of monumental statues from the palace of Sargon II at Khorsabad. Idus A. Lamassu, a winged bull with a human head. 8th century BC, Gypsius alabaster, height 420 centimeters, Louvre, Paris, France. Closer look. Divine protector. The Assyrians erected statues of guardian figures to ward off evil spirits. These creatures wore horned helm to signify their divinity. Several local deities, such as Asur, Ishtar, and Shamash, were portrayed wearing a cap with one or more pairs of horns. The remainder of each creature's body emphasized its strength, a bull or a lion, its speed, the wings, and its intelligence, the human head. Ion context. Cuneiform writing. Cuneiform. Wedge-shaped. Writing, the world's first script, was invented in Mesopotamia around 3000 SC. It was written by pressing a reed pen into wet clay. A number of different Near Eastern languages, Sumerian, Akkadian, Elamite, Hittite, and Hurrian, were written in his way. Cuneiform brick. This inscription lists the name and titles of Shalmaneser III, king of Assyria, before referring to the construction of a temple in Nimrud. 8th century BC, clay, British Museum, London, UK. King Shalmaneser III. This shows the king in an important ritual role, as the protector of the Tree of Life. 9th century BC, Ivory, Iraq Museum, Baghdad, Iraq. Ashurnasirpal II at a lion hunt detail. Lion hunting was more than a sport of Assyrian kings. It had religious connotations. 7th century BC, whole panel length 224 centimeters, limestone, British Museum, London, UK. Babylonian. Ness 800-1595 BC. Babylon first came to prominence during the reign of King Hammurabi, 1792-50 SC, who introduced a celebrated law code and is commemorated in a number of sculptures and stelae, upright stones inscribed with names or figures. Babylonians were overrun by the Hittites for a time, but recovered their fortunes and reached the peak of their power under King Nebuchadnezzar. 605-562 SC. He created a powerful empire, restoring Babylon itself to its former glory. The Babylonians' most distinctive artworks were animal reliefs, which they produced on glazed, polychrome bricks. The creatures were modeled on a panel of damp clay, which was then cut up into bricks and fired. The examples adorning the Ishtar Gate, the spectacular entrance to Babylon, are particularly impressive. Mushushu, a lion bird snake monster adorning the Ishtar Gate. Mushushu is the attribute and mount of Marduk, the nation's protective deity. 605-562 BC, glazed. Terracotta bricks, 116x167 cm, Detroit Institute of Arts, Detroit, U.S. He worshipper of Larsa. An inscription on the base identifies this as a commission by Amun from Larsa. It invokes the protection of the god Amaru for King Hammurabi of Babylon. C. 1750 BC, bronze and gold, Louvre, Paris, France. Persan. C. 3000 BC 642 c. The inhabitants of the area now known as Iran were producing distinguished artworks from the Bronze Age. At Susa, the Elamites developed an elegant style of pottery, while in the west, the Lauristan culture was noted for its highly decorative horse trappings. Persians themselves emerged wealthiest in the 7th century BC, and eventually controlled an empire that extended from Libya to India. Assyrians, Babylonians, and Greeks probably made sculptures for the Persians, producing their finest masterpieces at Persepolis. Even in its present, ruined state, its monumental sculptures and relief carvings are spectacular. On a smaller scale, they also created exquisite metalwork, such as the lavish, golden objects found in the Oxus treasure. The Persian Empire, the largest of the ancient world, was conquered by Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC. It was the wealthiest city under the sun, filled with precious objects of every kind. Diodorus Siculus, 1st century BC Greek historian, from his description of the burning of Persepolis by Alexander the Great. Giant griffin. This colossal statue is from the ancient capital Persepolis. The griffin, which combined a lion body with an eagle's head, was a common, ornamental feature in Eastern art. 518-465 BC, limestone, Persepolis, Iran. Winged creature ornament. This exquisite item of jewelry depicts a winged stag with the head of a horned lion. C5th-4thj, century BC, gold, height 6 centimeters, British Museum, London, UK. A dish depicting King Ardashir II. Ardashir II belonged to the later Sasanian dynasty, which produced outstanding examples of embossed silver vessels. C380C, silver, diameter 28 centimeters, National Museum of Iran, Tehran, Iran. Egyptian art was opulent, monumental, and often very colorful. Using natural form and geometric designs, it was almost entirely symbolic and had very precise meaning. Egyptian art flourished little changed for almost 3,000 years, and had a profound influence on neighboring Greek cultures. Origins and influences. Egyptian civilization grew up around the fertile Nile Valley. The annual flooding of the river provided rich farming land, in stark contrast with the deserts that surrounded it. In addition, the area was blessed with extensive mineral resources, while Egypt's cities were well placed to control the Nile region's trading routes. The resulting wealth attracted a diverse mix of conquerors, who helped to create the nation's complex culture. From the outset, Egyptian art reflected its geographical and political setting. The country was formed from the union of Lower Egypt, the Nile Delta, and Upper Egypt, the thin strip of land along the length of the Nile Valley. These kingdoms were symbolized, respectively, by a red and a white crown, by the cobra and the vulture, and by the papyrus plant, and the lotus flower. These pairs of symbols were ubiquitous. They can be found on the pharaoh's headdress, his throne, and in temples. Funerary mask of Tutankhamun / his gold-inlaid funerary mask, now in the Egyptian National Museum Cairo, was placed over the head and shoulders of Tutankhamun's mummy. The latter was encased in 3 coffins, the innermost which was made of solid gold. Currentevans. 2518 to 493 BC rule of Chephren. He was buried in one of the largest of the pyramids at Giza, and may be the model for the Sphinx. 1336 to 1327 BC reign of Tutankhamun, the boy king. His rule was marked by a return to orthodoxy. He died very young, but his tomb is the only one from the New Kingdom period to have survived intact. 1279 to 1213 BC renowned as a great warrior, Ramesses II defeated the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh, c. 1274 BC. Ancient Egypt. Timeline. Egyptian history is traditionally divided into 3 main periods. The Old Kingdom, c. 2647, 2124 BC, witnessed the building of the Sphinx and the pyramids at Giza. The Middle Kingdom, c. 2040-1648 BC, extended from the 11th to the 17th dynasty, while the New Kingdom, c. 1540-1069 BC, produced the tomb and treasures of Tutankhamun and the monuments of Ramesses II, which include Abu Simbel. 2600 to 2500 BC, 4th Dynasty, the Great Sphinx. 400-1350 BCA, 18th Dynasty, flowing the marshes. c. 1340, 18th Dynasty, bust of Queen Nefertiti. 1279 to 1213 BC, 19th Dynasty, Ramesses II smiting his enemies. 664 to 332 BC, 26th to 30th Dynasties, the canopic jars of Hormsaf. Chronology. The splendors of Egyptian art developed slowly, over the course of many centuries. The pre-dynastic phase, which dates back to around 5008 CC, produced a range of pottery and small-scale sculpture. By the time that the first dynasty of kings, c. 2970-2793 BC, assumed control, many of the basic forms of the culture were taking shape. Some of these altered remarkably little over the years, surviving until after 332 BC, when Alexander the Great displaced the 31st and final dynasty. Style and subjects. The Egyptians had no word for art. They valued fine craftsmanship, but did not necessarily link it with aesthetics or individual expression. Their artworks were purely functional, designed to facilitate their worship of the gods and help smooth their passage to the afterlife. There was a firm belief that, when objects or events were correctly reproduced, accompanied by the necessary rituals, they could provide a genuine point of contact between the realms of the living and the world beyond. This, correct, form of depiction amounted to a distinctive type of stylization. For example, the larger the size of a figure, the higher his or her status. Artists were also expected to portray the essence of their subject, without distracting, temporary features. Figures in paintings and reliefs were depicted in a form of profile, while statues were carved in a rigid set of postures and had blank, otherworldly expressions. There was no perspective. Instead, complex events were shown in sequence, rather like a cartoon strip. The figures were placed on horizontal baselines, known today as registers, and if any explanations were needed, these were provided by hieroglyphs, literally, sacred carvings. The symbols used in this pictorial language were incorporated into the overall composition. They can appear very decorative, and normally had religious overtones, especially when they were used to forming incantations on objects relating to the dead. Amulet in the form of a vulture, his exquisite object was placed as a charm around the neck of Tutankhamun's mummy. 18th Dynasty, c. 1540, 1295 SC, gold encrusted with lapis lazuli and cornelian, 6.5 x 11 centimeters, Egyptian National Museum, Cairo, Egypt. Mummy case of Nebuchadnezzar he deceased was a priest from Thebes. His coffin is adorned with various scenes of protection and rebirth. 22nd Dynasty, 945 to 730 BC, Cartonnage, Brooklyn Museum of Art, New York, US. Egyptian funeral art. 31 Dynasties, c. 2920 BC 332 BC. A considerable proportion of the artworks produced in ancient Egypt were created for the benefit of the dead. Throughout their long history, the Egyptians believed firmly in the existence of an afterlife and their need to prepare for it. First and foremost, this meant preserving their physical remains. Their corpses were elaborately embalmed and certain internal organs were stored in 4 canopic jars, each presided over by one of the 4 sons of Horus. The dead were furnished with everything that they might need in the afterlife, from jewelry to furniture, and the tombs of the wealthy were lavishly decorated to provide a pleasing environment for the occupants. The dead were expected to work in the afterlife, but servants called shabtas eased this burden. The path to the afterlife was smoothed by a host of rituals and incantations. Many of these were contained in a series of texts entitled Spells for Coming Forth by Day, popularly known as the Book of the Dead. The canopic jars of Horus, these jars held the internal organs, liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines, which were removed during the mummification process. Late period, 664 to 332 BC, alabaster, height 37 centimeters, Louvre, Paris, France. Cielo-Asiaraic. Divine protector. This stopper represents Happy, the 8-headed guardian of the north. His jar held the lungs. Fowling in the marshes from the tomb of Nebuchadnezzar at Thebes. This painting shows an Egyptian artist's typical blend of realism and stylization. The goose on the boat is closely observed, while the cat performs an impossible balancing act on 2 reeds. 18th Dynasty, c. 1350 BC, wall painting, 98 by 83 by 22 centimeters, British Museum, London, UK. The heart of Osiris has in truth been weighed, and his soul has stood as a witness for him. Incantation from the Book of the Dead. The weighing of the heart against the feather of truth. This is the judgment scene from the Book of the Dead belonging to a man called Eni. He stands on the left with his wife, watching as his heart is weighed against the feather, which is the symbol of Ma'at, divine order. Eni Spie, the human-headed bird representing his spirit, also observes the process. 19th Dynasty, c. 1275 Ace, painted papyrus, 45x31 cm, British Museum, London, UK. Cielo-Asiaraic. Funerary deity. The jackal-headed god Anubis was a key figure in the judging of the dead. He guarded the mummy and weighed the deceased's heart, regarded as the seat of character and intellect. If it was found wanting, it would be consumed by the devourer, the creature on the right. Shabdi figures. Shabdi, answerer, figurines were symbolic servants, placed in the tomb with the dead. In the afterlife, they would carry out any menial tasks for their masters. New Kingdom, c. 1567, 1085 BC, wooden faience, various sizes, Louvre, Paris, France. Egyptian sculpture. 2nd Dynasty, c. 2793 BC 2647 BC. The Egyptians excelled at low-relief carving, producing high-quality work from the pre-dynastic era, 5500 to 3100 BC, onwards. Fine examples can be found on palettes, stelae, and in tombs. From the outset, they adopted certain artistic conventions. The human figure was shown in partial profile. The head and the limbs were viewed from the side, while the chest and a single eye faced the front. A similar approach was employed in paintings. Figures were portrayed on different scales, with kings and gods towering over their inferiors. Background details were normally kept to a minimum. Instead, the context of the scene would be explained in the accompanying hieroglyphs. Sculpture in the round only came into its own in the 2nd Dynasty, but here, too, the figures were highly stylized. The models gazed ahead and were seen in strict profile, when viewed from the side. High-status figures were idealized. Male figures might be portrayed in a walking pose, but otherwise there was very little suggestion of movement. The overall shape of the sculpture shows the block from which each was carved. In context. Magic symbols. The Egyptians believed that divine symbols could ward off evil, and the Wedjad eye was one of the most potent examples. Representing the Eye of Horus, which was torn out and then restored, it was linked with regeneration and was often placed in mummy wrappings. Ornament with Wedjad eye, c. 1370-52, this lavish item was found on Tutankhamun's mummy. Statue of Chephren the king is seated on a lion throne with Horus, the falcon-headed god, perched on the back of Chepren's chair, not visible from this view. The bird spreads its wings protectively around Chepren's head, emphasizing that the king is his representative on earth. The statue was discovered in 1860 at Chepren's Valley. Temple at Giza Point 4th Dynasty, c. 2500 BC, diorite, height 168 cm. Egyptian Museum, Cairo, Egypt. Great Sphinx / his enormous statue, the largest in Egypt, was built as a guardian figure. It combines the body of a lion with the head of a man wearing the royal headcloth. 4th Dynasty, c. 2500 BC, limestone, height 20 m, length 74 m, Giza, Egypt. Details of the room emerge slowly from the haze, strange animals, statues, and gold everywhere. The glint of gold. Howard Carter, archaeologist, describing his first glimpse inside Tutankhamun's tomb. Ramesses II smiting his enemies / his was a favorite theme in Egyptian art, demonstrating the power and authority of the pharaoh. Here, Ramesses grips a Nubian, a Libyan, and a Syrian by their hair. As the most important figure in the composition, he is shown on a larger scale than the prisoners. 19th Dynasty, c. 1297, 1185 BC, painted limestone, Egyptian National Museum, Cairo, Egypt. Bust of Queen Nefertiti VII. His famous portrait was excavated from a studio belonging to Thutmose, the court sculptor of Akhenaten, Nefertiti's husband. It dates from the Amarna period, when Egyptian art displayed a degree of naturalism, allowing Nefertiti's beauty to shine through. 18th Dynasty, c. 1340 BC, painted limestone, height 50 centimeters, Egyptisches Museum, Berlin, Germany. Closir Luke. The blind eye. Although the portrait was highly finished in other respects, one of Nefertiti's eyes was left blank. One theory is that the bust was actually a template, so there was no need to duplicate this detail. Statue of Horus discovered at Edfu, one of the best preserved Egyptian temples. This is a fine example of monumental sculpture. Horus, the sky god, was sometimes portrayed as a human with a falcon's head. Here, he is shown as a living falcon, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. Ptolemaic period, 332 to 30 BC stone, Temple of Horus, Edfu, Egypt. Some of the most spectacular examples of ancient art were produced in the Far East and the Indian subcontinent. Chinese craftsmen produced a magnificent range of metalwork and sculpture for the tombs of the mighty, while Indian artists created their first Buddhist masterpieces. India, one of the world's earliest civilizations, grew up along the Indus Valley. By around 2500 BC, a number of cities had emerged, with grid-planned streets, a sophisticated drainage system, and bathing facilities. The two main centers, which show a strong similarity in their layout, were at Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. This culture produced some distinctive pottery and carving. However, it is best remembered for its distinctive seals. The Indus Valley civilization went into decline after 1800 BC, and there was a considerable gap before the arts revived under Emperor Ashoka, c. 269-232 BCE. He encouraged development of a new kind of sculpture through his many Buddhist monuments. Stone became the favored material for carving, its durability becoming apparent from trading with countries such as Greece, Iran, Egypt, and Southeast Asia. China. The Shang Dynasty bronzes mark a defining moment in Chinese culture. The craftsmen developed and refined a process that allowed them to produce large bronze vessels of unparalleled quality. The process, called piecewood casting, employed an unusual alloy, adding lead to the normal mix of copper and tin. During casting, the surface of the vessels could be adorned with fantastic, animal-like imagery and motifs, which may have been related to ancient sacrificial or funerary rites. The creation of the terracotta army for the tomb of Oin Shi Huang is equally remarkable, but for different reasons. This was an early example of mass production. Standard molds were created for the main body parts. There were 8 different torsos, 2 types of leg, 8 faces, and so on. These were assembled in different combinations and then finished by hand, to give each of the figures an individual look. This care and attention to detail is particularly impressive, given that the figures were never meant to be seen by any living person. Head of a soldier, terracotta army, despite the vast number of figures that were required for the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, craftsmen took pains to ensure that every figure appeared different. Made around 210 BC, this soldier has a top knot indicating his rank of general. Civilizations of the East. India. C. 2500 BC 185 BC. For many historians, the steatite seals produced in the Indus Valley are extraordinary artworks of genuine quality. More than 4,000 of these have been unearthed. Most depict animals, though there are a few enigmatic human figures. The script has not yet been deciphered, but there is speculation that the words could be personal names, as the seals were used as tokens of ownership in the region's commercial dealings with Mesopotamia. The Mauryan era, 326 to 184 SC, heralded the arrival of Buddhist art. In early images, the Buddha was not portrayed physically, but was represented indirectly by symbols such as a wheel and a lion, both of which are featured on the Ashoka pillar. Yakshis were originally linked with nature worship, but they were adapted for use in Buddhist art. Yakshur figure discovered at the ancient site of Tamralipta, now Tamluk. This figure is thought to be a Yakshur, a nature spirit, although the weapons and hair headdress may suggest a more powerful role. 1st century BC, terracotta, Ashmolean, Oxford, UK. Seal from Mohenjo-daro / into seals were among the earliest objects to combine words with images. This curious creature has been dubbed a unicorn, bull, because only one horn is visible. C. 2300 SC, steatite, with 3.5 centimeters, National Museum of Pakistan, Karachi, Pakistan. Ashoka pillar detail. The Emperor Ashoka erected a series of pillars with Buddhist symbols to mark his conversion to the faith. The wheel represents the first sermon given by the Buddha in Adir Parkat Sarnath. 3rd century BC, sandstone, height 213 centimeters, Sarnath, Uttar Pradesh, India. China. C. 1500 BC 207 BC. Many of China's earliest masterpieces were excavated after burial with the dead. During the era of the Shang dynasty, c. 1500-1050 SC, and the Zhou dynasty, c. 1050-221 SC, the graves of rulers frequently contained items made of bronze or jade. These materials were costly and, as such, were recognized as symbols of high status, though they also served a variety of ritual functions. The Chinese had been fascinated with jade since Neolithic times, believing it had magical qualities. Celestial discs were often interred with the dead, though these pale into insignificance beside loose burial suits. These were made up of 2,000 jade tablets, sewn together with gold thread. Bronze was used for a sizable repertoire of ritual vessels. Most of these were containers for the food and drink used in sacrifices and during funerary banquets. Initially, these rituals took place in the open air or in palaces, though the objects were subsequently buried with their owners. The material used for the terracotta army had no such intrinsic value, but the scale of the production costs more than compensated for this. Dough vessel / his was produced during the Warring States era, the final phase of the Zhou dynasty. The dough is a food container. Its lid can also serve as a bowl. 5th to 4th century BC, bronze and gold, height 19.2 centimeters, China. Ritual vessel with cover, a product of the Western Zhou dynasty. This ceremonial bucket is decorated with a Tao Tai monster mask, featuring the face of a horned monster. Cent 1th 10th century BC, bronze, height 25 centimeters, Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, U.S. Burial suit of Princess Still One jade was a rare and expensive stone in China and was believed to have the power to preserve human bodies. With this in mind, Prince Lushing ordered lavish burial suits for himself and his wife. 2nd century BC, jade, length 188 centimeters, Hebei Provincial Museum, Hebei Province, China. Yu vessel thought to have been made in Hunan Province. This is the most famous of the ritual vessels produced in the Shang Dynasty period. A Yu Isa ceremonial bucket with a swinging handle, designed to hold alcohol. 11th century BC bronze, height 35 centimeters, Musée Cernuschi, Paris. Cielo Asiatic. Feline monster nicknamed the Tigress. The precise meaning of the human figure that clings perilously below the monster's fangs is uncertain, although it may be linked with the blood sacrifices that played an important part in the ancient rituals. The terracotta army, more than 7,000 clay warriors were produced, together with hundreds of horses and chariots, as a posthumous escort for China's first emperor. They were placed in a network of corridors and pits, guarding the main tomb complex. C210 SC, terracotta, average height of figure 180 to 190 centimeters, tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, Litong, near Xi'an, China. Greek art is widely regarded as the chief cornerstone of Western civilization. Inspired by the achievements of the Egyptians and the Minoan culture on Crete, Greek sculptors strove for and succeeded in creating a perfect balance of beauty, harmony, and proportion. Origins and influences: the Aegean. Greek culture dates back to the Bronze Age, c. 3000 BC. In the Aegean, there were important developments in the Cyclades and on Crete, although, ultimately, both cultures were absorbed by the Mycenaeans. However, their association was not straightforward. At first, the Minoan, Cretan, influence was far stronger, and some historians used to regard Mycenaean art as a provincial form of it. The Minoans were not Greek speakers. Their origins are uncertain, although some believe that they came from Anatolia, Asian Turkey. Certainly, their art forms display a number of Eastern traits, most notably from Egypt, Syria, and Anatolia. Minoan craftsmen rapidly outshone these sources, though, producing a rich culture centered on their palaces and their bull cult. The Mycenaeans absorbed Minoan ideas, only taking the lead when the Cretan civilization collapsed in c. 1400 SC. The Mycenaeans, who were dominated by a warrior aristocracy, rapidly grew rich and powerful, as the wealth of their graves attests. One theory suggests that they fought as mercenaries for the Egyptians, who paid them in gold. Their decline dates from around 1100 BC. View of the Acropolis. The citadel of Athens was built on top of the Acropolis, overlooking the city. Its principal structure is the Parthenon, a temple which was begun in 447 BC. To replace the buildings that were destroyed during the Persian occupation. Orientevans. c. 1250 BC. Regarded as a legend by some, there is evidence that the famous Trojan War took place around this time. 776 BC. First recorded Olympic Games. 490 BC. The Persians invade Greece and occupy Athens. They are expelled after defeats at Salamis, 480, and Plataea, 479. 356 BC. Birth of Alexander the Great. Educated by Aristotle, he went on to create a vast empire. He also founded the city of Alexandria in 331 BC. Ancient Greece. Timeline. The first major achievements on the Greek mainland stemmed from the Mycenaean culture, which flourished from around 1600 to 1100 BC. The Archaic period produced some early masterpieces, most notably the Fagarnecalcad New York 2 Foser, c. 640 BC, but it was during the Classical era that Greek art blossomed fully. The Parthenon sculptures, 447, 432 BC, provide the highlight of Athenian culture, which Alexander the Great, 356 to 323 BC, spread far and wide. c. 1500 BC, Aegean, funerary mask. 640 to 630 BC, Archaic, the Lady of Oser. 540 to 530 BC, Archaic, Achilles slaying Penthesilea. 447 to 432 BC, Classical, Lapith fighting a centaur. c. 42-20 BC, Hellenistic, Lacan and his sons. Origins and influences Greece. During the Iron Age, Greek culture needed to renew itself. Following the decline of the Mycenaeans, which may have been prompted by Dorian invaders from the north, parts of the mainland became increasingly depopulated. The era of the Mycenaeans was remembered as a heroic age, celebrated in Greek legends, but little of its material culture survived. The revival began to take place during the geometric period, c. 900 c. 750 BC, which takes its name from the simple, linear design soft pottery of the time. Towards the end of this phase, Eastern influences began to creep in, as trading links with the East improved. This continued throughout the Archaic period, c. 750-480 SC, when Greek artists became more confident and gained a taste for experimentation. The scale of archaic artworks was usually modest, but exposure to the opulent and monumental sculpture of Egypt changed attitudes. In the 7th century BC, Greek mercenaries were employed in Egypt and were allowed to settle at a single site, Naucratis. Through this, their only legitimate entry point into the land of the pharaohs, Greek artists gained inspiration and a new sense of ambition. Classical art. For much of the Archaic period, Greek art was still essentially regional. The idea of a national Greek identity only began to take root in the 6th century BC. This grew more pronounced in the following century, when the country faced a common threat. The Persian invasion, 490 BC, stirred the Greeks into action, and once the invaders had been expelled, they founded the Delian League, 478 BC, to maintain this sense of unity. The achievements of the classical era epitomized these bonds. The building of the Parthenon was a physical symbol of national pride, while the spirit of the new style was the defining point of Greek civilization. The twin goals of naturalism and idealism were unparalleled in the ancient world, and they provided inspiration for generations of artists in the West. Horse of Selene, one of the most famous sculptures from the Parthenon frieze. It displays the exhaustion and strain that the horse has suffered while pulling the chariot of Selene, the moon goddess, across the night sky. 447 to 432 8c, stone, length 83 centimeters, British Museum, London, England. The Ludovisi throne, or Throne of Venus. From Villa Ludovisi, this is an example of the Western Greek style, produced by an expatriate artist working in Italy. The carving is particularly notable for the subtle treatment of the drapery. c. 470-460 BC, marble, Palazzo Altemps, Rome, Italy. Aegean. c. 3000 c. 1100 BC. Before the heyday of ancient Greek art, a group of different cultures flourished in the area around the Aegean Sea. The earliest of these developed in the Cyclades Islands, where settlers from Asia Minor arrived in around 3000 BC. Their most distinctive artifacts are tiny, marble figurines, with spare, minimalistic forms that have been greatly admired by modern sculptors. Minoan culture emerged on Crete at a similar period. The name was coined by the archaeologist, Sir Arthur Evans, because of the island's mythical association with King Minos and his Minotaur. Minoan art was centered around its palaces, which were adorned with spectacular wall paintings. The Cretans also produced fine pottery and jewelry. Mycenaean culture developed on the Greek mainland. Its outstanding artworks were discovered in the royal graves at the city of Mycenae itself. These yielded up a stunning array of gold masks, jewelry, weapons, and vessels. Minoan pottery jar Cretan artists were particularly fond of decorating their pots with extravagant octopus designs that wound around the entire vessel. This type of jar was probably used for storing or transporting olive oil. 1450 to 1400 BC, painted earthenware, Ashmolean, Oxford, UK. Funerary mask. This piece is popularly known as the Mask of Agamemnon, the Greek leader in the Trojan War. It is not a death mask. The object was created separately and then placed over the dead man's face. 16th century BC, gold, height 26 centimeters, National Archaeological Museum, Athens, Greece. The bull-leaping fresco / his famous mural comes from the palace at Knossos. It depicts the Minoan custom of bull-leaping, which was probably a ritual ceremony rather than a sport. Although heavily restored, Enough of the original painting has survived to give an idea of the local artist's gift for long, graceful, taut curves. C. 1500 BC, fresco, National Archaeological Museum, Athens, Greece. CLOSERIAC. Acrobat. These acrobatic displays were part of the bull cult, which flourished in ancient Crete. Historians have questioned whether such daring somersaults were physically possible, and some have suggested that the bulls were carefully tethered. Female figurine. This is the most common form of cycladic sculpture. Most of the figurines depict women with their arms folded across their body, although images of musicians have also been found. The carvings were generally placed in graves, but their precise function is uncertain. C. 2600, 2500 BC marble, height 21 centimeters, Benaki Museum, Athens, Greece. In context. Knossos, the grandest of the Minoan palaces, Knossos was not only a royal residence, but also contained shrines, granaries, workshops, and an open court where public ceremonies were staged. Large parts of the palace have been reconstructed. Knossos, viewed from the east according to legend, this is the site of the palace where King Minos lived. Greek Archaic. C. 750-480 BC. The Archaic period covers the early development of Greek art, from around 750 SC until 480 BC, when the Persians sacked Athens. In sculpture, Greek artists eagerly assimilated ideas from Egypt and the East, gradually producing their own, highly individual style. Progress was most evident in depictions of the kouros, nude male, and the kore, draped female. Most of these statues were used as grave markers, although some represented gods. In the earliest phase, the figures had stereotyped features and a rigid stance, with their arms barely leaving their sides. Over the course of this period, the poses became more relaxed, and the treatment of anatomy grew more convincing. The Archaic period was also the golden age of vase painting. Initially, the Corinthians dominated this field, but by Athens, its artists became masters of the black figure __ technique, highlighted in the work of Exekias, and later of the more sophisticated red figure technique, which superseded it. Antefix of a Gorgon's head. Plaques of this kind were very common in early Greek architecture. They were used as ornaments to mask the end of a row of roof tiles. The designs often featured monsters, as it was thought that these would ward off evil spirits. Gorgons, with their projecting fangs, tongues, and glaring eyes, were a popular choice. C. 6th century BC, terracotta, length 25 centimeters, private collection. Achilles slaying the Amazon queen, Penthesilea. This moment of high drama was painted by Exekias, the most famous exponent of the black figure style of decoration. As he delivers the fatal blow, Achilles falls in love with his enemy. 6th century 8th CE pottery, height 42 centimeters, British Museum, London, UK. The Lady of Auxerre. This remarkable statuette owes its name to its first known owner, a theater manager in Auxerre, who used it as a prop in an operetta. It is the finest surviving example of the Daedalic style of sculpture. Named after the mythical figure Daedalus, who was said to have created the first Greek statues. It was made in Crete and was originally painted. C. 640 BC, limestone, height 65 centimeters, Louvre, Paris, France. CLOSER Luke. The Archaic smile. Many statues from the Archaic period had a smile on their face. This probably had a symbolic meaning, as the smile was often featured in contexts that were far from humorous. Most historians believe that a smile was meant to signify health and vitality. Achilles tending the wounded Patroclus. This red figure scene was produced for the interior of Achelix, cup, by the Sosias painter. He belonged to a group of vase painters, now known as the Pioneers. C. 500 BC pottery, diameter 20 centimeters, Staatliche Museum, Berlin, Germany. Anavisos kouros, named after the village where it was found. This kouros was a warrior's grave marker. C. 530 Ace marble, height 194 centimeters, National Archaeological Museum, Athens, Greece. Greek classical, 480 to 323 BC. Greek culture reached new heights during the classical period, from 480 to 323 BC, when victory over the Persians ushered in an era of prosperity and self-confidence. In Athens, democracy took root, literature flourished, and the study of history and philosophy became established. National and civic pride increased, particularly in Athens, which became dominant in Greece up to c. 413 BC. The Parthenon, with its magnificent sculptures of Greek triumphs, was designed to embody this new mood. In the visual arts, sculptors gained a fine understanding of the structure of the body and how it moved, and achieved a new blend of realism and the ideal. This was particularly evident in the work of Polykleitos, who liked to contrast the taut, straining muscles of one limb with the relaxed pose of another. Classical sculptors were not satisfied, however, with mere anatomical accuracy. Their concept of beauty entailed both ideal proportions and a serene nobility of expression. In pursuit of this goal, they produced statues of mortals that are barely distinguishable from those of their gods. Cavalcade from the frieze that was on the Parthenon, these horsemen form part of a procession. Even though the carving is in very shallow relief, the overlapping horses provide a sense of depth and movement. 447 to 432 BCE marble, height 106 centimeters, British Museum, London, UK. Statue of Zeus or Poseidon / his figure probably once held a weapon, a thunderbolt, Zeus, or a trident, Poseidon. c. 460 BCE bronze, height 209 centimeters, National Archaeological Museum, Athens, Greece. Closeric. Decorative details. The figure would originally have looked even more realistic, with eyes and eyebrows inlaid with a different material, probably glass or stone. The spear carrier / his is a Roman copy of a lost bronze statue by Polykleitos of Argos, one of the greatest sculptors of antiquity. The impassive gaze is typically classical, as are the harmonious proportions of the figure and the perfect balance of the pose. c. 440 BC, Greek original, marble, height 212 centimeters, Museo Archeologico Nazionale, Naples, Italy. Discobolus, the discus thrower. This Roman copy is thought to be a marble version of a lost bronze by Myron. A native of Attica, he was famed for his realism and for his skill at depicting figures in active poses. Unlike modern athletes, the Greeks did not spin round before hurling the discus. c. 450 Ace, Greek original, marble, height 155 centimeters, Vatican Museums and Galleries, Vatican City. A Lapith fighting a centaur. The Parthenon had 92 high-relief carvings of mythical battles. The most memorable examples show the human Lapiths confronting the centaurs at a wedding feast, after the latter had been maddened by wine. 447 to 432 BCE marble, height 172 centimeters, British Museum, London, UK.